Well, welcome back to another episode of Revolutionize Your Life with Jenkins, where we dive deep into the mindset shifts, strategies, and actions you need to unlock your potential and create lasting success. I'm your host, Lee Jenkins, and today we're tackling a common challenge that affects all of us at one point or another, and that's the knowing-doing gap. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you know exactly what you should be doing, but for some reason you're just not doing it? Maybe you know you need to eat healthier, start that business, or take action on a project you've been thinking about for months, but something always seems to hold you back from actually getting it done. Now, if that sounds familiar, guess what? You're not alone. So this is what we call the knowing-doing gap, the space between knowing what you should do and actually doing it. And the truth is, most of us fall into this gap more often than we'd like to admit. So in today's episode, we're going to explore why this gap exists, and more importantly, how can you start closing it? You see, having the knowledge isn't enough to get results. It's the actions you take that make the difference. And if you've been struggling to turn what you know into consistent action, well, today's episode is for you. So as we go through this conversation, I want you to start thinking about an area in your life where you've been stuck in this gap. Maybe it's a health goal, a financial goal, or a personal development goal. Whatever it is, if you know what you need to do but haven't been able to follow through, well, you're in the right place. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why the knowing-doing gap exists, and most importantly, you'll have practical steps to help you close it and start turning your knowledge into action. So, if you're ready to stop talking about what you're going to do and start doing it, let's get into it. Alright, so let's dive deeper into the knowing-doing gap. What it is, why it shows up, and how you can begin to close it. The knowing-doing gap is something most of us experience at some point in our lives. It's that space between having the knowledge, knowing what to do, and actually taking the actions that lead to results. And here's the thing. It's not a lack of knowledge that holds most people back. In today's world, we have more information than ever at our fingertips. We can Google anything, take online courses, read books, and listen to podcasts just like this one. So it's not about what you know, it's about what you're doing with what you know. But why is it so difficult to take that knowledge and put it into some type of action? Well, the answer lies in something deeper than just willpower or motivation. It's about our paradigms, that deeply ingrained habits, those beliefs and patterns of behavior that control most of us and most of what we do on a daily basis. So let me share a quick story with you. A few years ago, I was working with somebody who had big dreams of starting their own business. They knew what they wanted to do. They had studied the market, read all the right books, and attended countless seminars. In fact, they probably knew more about starting a business than most people. But despite all of that knowledge, they couldn't seem to take the first step. They'd spend months planning and preparing, but when it came time to actually do something, whether it was launching the website or reaching out to potential clients, they would freeze up. So why was that? It wasn't a lack of information. It wasn't even about fear of failure. It was their paradigm, the subconscious beliefs and patterns that had been holding them in place for years. You see, their subconscious mind was programmed to operate in a certain way. It was comfortable in the world of research and learning, but when it came time to act, the paradigm kicked in and said, this is too risky. Stay where it's safe. This is exactly what happens to so many of us. We know what we need to do, but our subconscious mind, our paradigms, they hold us back. They keep us stuck in familiar habits, even when those habits no longer serve us. Think about it. How often have you set a goal for yourself, like eating healthier or exercising more, and then found yourself falling back into old habits just days or weeks later? It's not because you don't know what to do. It's because your paradigm is running the show. But here's the good news. Once you understand this, you can begin to change it. The key to closing the knowing-doing gap is to reprogram your paradigm, to shift those deeply ingrained beliefs and habits so that they align with the actions that you need to take. This isn't always easy, but it's entirely possible. And when you learn how to shift your paradigm, you can start turning your knowledge into action consistently. That's when real transformation is going to start to happen. Now that we understand why the knowing-doing gap exists and how our paradigms often hold us back, let's talk about some practical steps that you can take to start closing that gap. It's not enough to simply know this information. You've got to apply it. So here's 4 steps you can start using today to turn your knowledge into action. Now, number 1 is identify your knowing-doing gap. So the first step is to recognize where your knowing-doing gap exists. This requires some honest reflection. Take a few moments today to think about an area in your life where you've been stuck. Is there something you know you should be doing but haven't been following through on? Maybe it's related to your health, like eating better or exercising more. Or maybe it's a career goal that you've been procrastinating on. It could be something as simple as managing your time more effectively or making an important phone call. Whatever it is, identify it clearly. Write it down. Recognizing where the gap exists is the first step to closing it. So next, it's time to look at the paradigms that are keeping you stuck. As we've talked about earlier, paradigms are deeply ingrained habits and beliefs that operate at the subconscious level. These paradigms often go unnoticed, but they're what drive most of us on our daily actions, or perhaps our inactions. So ask yourself, what beliefs or habits are holding me back from taking action? For example, if you're struggling to take action on a health goal, is there a belief that it's too hard, or I've tried that before and failed? If you're holding back in your career, or telling yourself, I'm not ready, or perhaps I'm not good enough yet, become aware of these limiting paradigms is crucial, because once you see them for what they are, you can begin to change them. Now, once you've identified your paradigms, the next step is to take action. But start small. Closing the knowing-doing gap doesn't require you to make massive changes overnight. In fact, the best way to start shifting your behavior is through small, consistent actions. Here's what I want you to do. Pick one small action you can take today that moves you in the direction of your goal. It could be something as simple as going for a 10-minute walk, sending that email you've been avoiding, or spending 15 minutes working on a project that you've been putting off. The key here is consistency. Small, consistent actions over time are what create real change. And as you take these changes or these actions, you'll begin to reprogram your paradigm. Your subconscious mind will start to adapt to the new behaviors. And over time, taking action will become your new normal. Now finally, let's talk about the power of repetition. Changing your paradigm and closing the knowing-doing gap isn't a one-time effort. It requires repetition. Just like learning a new skill, changing your habits is going to take practice. Here's how you can use repetition to your advantage. Now, once you've identified the action you need to take, commit to doing it consistently for a set period of time. Maybe it's every day for the next 30 days. The more you repeat the action, the more it becomes ingrained in your subconscious mind, and the easier it will be to keep doing it. This process of repetition helps you build new neural pathways in your brain. Over time, your new habits will replace the old ones, and the gap between knowing and doing will start to close. These 4 steps will help you begin bridging the knowing-doing gap in your own life. It's not about taking massive actions all at once. It's about consistently taking small steps that move you forward while reprogramming the paradigm that have been holding you back. Okay, now that we've explored the knowing-doing gap and how you can start closing it, here's the key message I want you to take away from today's episode. You see, knowing isn't enough. Results come from doing. We live in a world where we have access to more knowledge than ever before, but knowledge alone doesn't create change. It's the actions you take that make all the difference. What I want you to remember is this: it's not your lack of information that's holding you back, it's your paradigms. Those deeply ingrained beliefs and habits that are what keep you stuck in the gap between knowing and doing. But the good news is that you have the power to change those paradigms one small action at a time. Every time you take action, even if it's a small step, you're moving closer to closing that gap. You're shifting your habits, reprogramming your mind, and aligning your actions with the knowledge you already have. That's when true transformation happens. So as you go about your day, think about the gap in your own life. What's one thing you can do today to start closing that gap? Remember, it's not about massive leaps. It's about taking small, consistent steps in the right direction, because that's how you turn knowledge into action and action into results. All right, we've covered a lot today about the knowing-doing gap and how to close it. But as always, knowledge alone isn't enough. You need to take that action. So here's what I want you to do today. Let's start with number one here, is identify one area where you've been stuck. Take a few minutes today to reflect on one area of your life where you've been stuck in the knowing-doing gap. It could be a health goal, a project you've been putting off, a decision that you know you need to make. Write it down and commit to taking just one small action to start closing that gap. Okay, number two would be share your progress. Now, I'd love to hear from you about how you're working to close your knowing-doing gap. So reach out to me on social media, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or through my website at liamjenkins.com. Let's keep the conversation going and share what action steps you're taking. Remember, accountability is powerful, and sharing your journey can inspire others as well. And if today's episode resonated with you, here are a few more things I'd love for you to do. Number one, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Revolutionize Your Life. Every week, we're diving deep into mindset shifts, strategies, and practical steps to help you unlock your potential and achieve your goals. Number two, share this episode. If you found value in today's episode, share it with a friend, family member, or a colleague. The knowing-doing gap is something we all face, and you never know who might need that extra push to take action and close the gap in their own life. Number three, connect with me. I love hearing from listeners like you, so connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, or visit my website at liamjenkins.com to stay up to date on new content and resources. Let's keep the conversation going and work together to turn knowledge into action. Remember, closing the knowing-doing gap is a process. It's not about taking massive action all at once. It's about making small, consistent changes every single day. You have everything you need to start bridging the gap right now, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. Now, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank you for joining me on today's episode of Revolutionize Your Life with Liam Jenkins. And until next time, keep pushing yourself to take action, and watch as your knowledge turns into those wonderful results. Until next time, I'm Lee Jenkins.